Hello and welcome to the course. I'm Jody, your host today, and I'm speaking with Professor Jennifer Mosley from the Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice. Dr. Mosley is the winner of the Award for Excellence in Doctoral Student Mentoring at the Crown Family School. She's a professor, editor, faculty director, and much more. She's here today to talk to us about her career path and how she became a University of Chicago professor. Welcome to the course, Professor Mosley.
I'm Jennifer Mosley. I'm an associate professor at the Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy, and Practice. I'm also the editor of Social Service Review, which is a journal in the field of social welfare and social policy. And I am the faculty director for the Obama Foundation Scholars Program, which is a group of scholars that have been selected by the foundation for extra training in terms of leadership and social change. Until recently, I was also the faculty director of our new master's program in social sector leadership and nonprofit management at the Crown Family School.
Amazing. How long have you been at the university?
I've been at the university, I think it's 16, 17 years, maybe. It's been a while now. I've spent my whole career at the University of Chicago. I came here immediately after graduating from my PhD program. This was my first job as an academic, and it's been a great home for me.
Amazing. Incredible. I'm sure there's many academics very jealous of that landing in a place that you love. And I know from speaking with many of your colleagues now that it seems like an amazing place to be an academic, lots of support, and I can't wait to hear more about it. So, but before we get into like what's happening now, what you're doing in more detail, why don't you tell me a little bit about the younger Dr. Mosley? When you were young, what did you think you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, when I was really young, I think my parents would have told you that I always said I wanted to be a writer. And I suppose that in some ways, being a professor is like being a writer. I care a lot about what I write and the way that it's written, not just the content of it. And so I've been able to live out those dreams a little bit. But I think that was also partly a feature of kind of living in my own head a lot as a kid and wanting to find ways to sort of get my ideas and thoughts out there without necessarily talking about them. I was a pretty introverted kid, and that reading and writing was what I loved to do best. And I think I couldn't imagine a career in which my job was to read. And so a job to write seemed like the way to go. And now I think in some ways I have the best of both worlds. I get paid to read and write, which is fantastic.
Yeah, incredible. So tell me a little bit about your graduate experience. Tell me a bit about going to college and moving on from your younger dreams of becoming a writer to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I went to college at Reed College, which is a small liberal arts school in Portland, Oregon. I like to say I think it's not for everybody, but if it's for you, it's a great fit, and it was a great fit for me. It was a very intensely intellectual place with a lot of oddballs and people who were thinking about things differently and wanting to live their lives in different ways and avoid sort of conventional tropes. And that was kind of what I was looking for at the time. Provided me with a lot of inspiration of people, surrounded by people who were thinking about things in different ways and not wanting to settle for sort of what was expected of them. And that was really appealing to me. Somehow by the time I went to college, I had decided I wanted to go into psychology. And frankly, I don't really remember exactly why or how that happened. But I entered college deciding to be a psych major and stuck with that for a while. Somewhere maybe in my second year, I realized, actually, I think what I really wanted to do was sociology, not psychology. But at that point, it was too late for me to switch majors if I also wanted to study abroad, which I did. So I stuck with psychology, and I liked that, but I also was very involved in sociology. So,
can you remember the psychology class that made you think you initially wanted to be a psychologist, and also what made you decide maybe you wanted to be a sociologist?
So it wasn't a particular class, I think, that made me decide that I wanted to be a psychologist, because I definitely entered college thinking this was for me. I think I had a real interest in people and what makes people tick, and also some interest in helping people, but not interested in medicine. And so that seemed, I think, like something that was going to be a good fit. So I really just started with that idea. I don't think I really knew much about what psychology was, and particularly what academic psychology was. I think I had some notes
Mm,
about therapy. Uh,
mhm.
I'm not sure exactly. So, and I liked my classes in psychology a lot, but it never quite felt like, well, this is what's really burning me on fire in terms of how I want to spend the rest of my life. And my sociology classes really did. Now, I think I just never thought about sociology in some ways because I don't think I knew what that was when I was in high school. I don't think I
Yeah.
knew it even existed as a thing. So it took me a minute to explore that and realize that thinking a little bigger, kind of outside the individual, right? Psychology is very focused on individuals or dyads, right? Smaller kind of type, more personal type things. Whereas sociology is really thinking bigger about sort of larger societal structure and processes, and that was what really kind of set my brain alight, thinking this is what's really interesting to me, particularly from a research perspective. It was somewhere in the middle of my undergraduate career. I thought, oh, maybe being a researcher, like maybe being an academic, is actually what I want to do, a way that I can fulfill some of these different things that I'm interested in. I'm interested in communicating through writing. I'm interested in thinking about social processes. I'm interested in doing something that's going to help the world, maybe become a better place. And that seemed like something that was possible through that. And so,
Do you remember if was there a faculty member that you looked up to, or a book that you read, or anything that inspired that idea of? I think the idea of becoming an academic, unless your parents are academics or something like that, is a pretty foreign concept. So I'm just curious.
yeah, absolutely. So I do not have any academics in my extended family. No one in my family had gone on to get a PhD before. No one was an academic. So I didn't really understand very much about that life or really what that meant. So it really was looking to my undergraduate mentors and looking at their lives, what they were doing, what their jobs looked like, the way that they engaged with me, to kind of think about, is this something that I might want to do? And I was very lucky to have two just exceptional mentors as an undergraduate. One was in psychology. Marian Underwood was a developmental psychopathologist who I was just very lucky to work with Marion. So she was really my initial bridge to doing research. I started working in her lab as a third year in college, and she was incredibly generous with her undergraduate students, involving us in all kinds of different aspects of her research, really giving us an opportunity to be involved at multiple levels, working with participants, thinking about IRB, running sessions, thinking about how we might improve our research protocols, writing up things, doing consent. We were doing recruiting. We were really involved at all levels. And that was just an incredible opportunity to kind of demystify the research process, and really learn about what it really meant to do research on a day-to-day basis. I think I worked for her full time in the summer between my junior and senior years in college and throughout my senior year. And I just learned a ton about what goes into research, both how frustratingly slow it can be sometimes, what some of the pitfalls might be, as well as kind of the excitement of doing things and working with people, and thinking about scientifically asking questions that are really interesting. So that was just an incredible opportunity. She was a fairly new assistant professor at the time. And so I think she seemed, I mean, not immediately close to my age, but achievable, right? So she seemed approachable, I guess is maybe a better word for that. And so I thought, oh, okay, I can imagine sort of my life looking like this.
Right.
In sociology, my mentor was quite different. I worked with a man named John Pock, who was sort of legendary in the sociology department there for training people to go on in graduate school. He was a very senior, full professor, and was well known throughout the school for being quite cranky. He wasn't the most popular professor on campus, but for some reason, I really liked him a lot. Both he and Marian Underwood, I feel like they really saw something in me and really took the time to push me to be my best. I think I was a sort of student who, throughout my elementary and high school years, I never really liked school that much. I was good at it, but I really feel particularly inspired. I certainly wasn't the kind of person that was like, I love school. I always want to do school. Not my path to academia at all. In fact, I kind of didn't like school really. I didn't like most of my teachers. I've been critiqued before for not being particularly coachable. Uh, but there was something, but I also kind of flew under the radar a lot, I think, as a person who was, maybe not a problem in the classroom, was pretty good, but probably not usually putting in my top effort. And somehow Professor Underwood and Professor Pock, they really saw that I had something more to give and really pushed me to do that. They didn't let me sort of fly under the radar or skate with kind of doing kind of most of the way, but not all the way work. And the challenge that they presented to me and the belief that they placed in me that I could be better, that I could make real insights was really transformative. So I worked with John Pock in sociology a lot in the areas of social stratification, urban sociology, organizational sociology, in particular. And those classes were just really transformational for me in terms of thinking about the larger social world and how we might research and study those things.
Sounds like they really sound like model mentors, case studies for what does a mentor do, seeking out those students who don't even know their potential and helping to raise the bar for them and elevate their work.
Mhm.
So when you left undergrad, what were your plans and what did you do? Did you go straight to
Yeah.
grad school?
So I did not go straight to graduate school. I think I had a sense of that, well, that seems like something I probably want to do, but kind of down the road. My first job out of undergrad, well, not immediately. First, I went to Chile with a friend of mine for a while. And then then I worked at Borders Books for a while, not doing much at all. But then I actually took a pay cut from my job at Borders Books to work at a residential treatment facility for young boys who were struggling with mental and behavioral health challenges. And that seemed like a good way to use my psychology degree and maybe do something that was a little bit more of a like real job. And so I did that. And that was a really transformative experience for me. So in this place, most of the people who worked directly sort of in the milieu with these boys, and I was working on a unit with eight boys who were like ages 6 to 8. So they were pretty young. And, we were all pretty fresh out of college. I would say we didn't have a lot of training. We didn't really know what we were doing.
Yeah.
We were kind of doing our best. And these were extremely troubled kids. It's not easy to end up in a locked facility when you are 7 years old. And kids don't end up in that situation on their own, right? So a lot of these kids had come from families that had experienced a lot of trauma and a lot of difficulties. So families that had been homeless, families that struggled with substance abuse, sometimes different features of child maltreatment. So these were kids who had seen much more in their lives in some ways than I'd seen in mine. And I learned a lot from them and also from being in there. What I really learned was that kind of what I'd already suspected in my psychology classes, that working with individuals one at a time, even though it was gratifying in some ways, and I liked forming those relationships with those boys and seeing our work pay off and seeing their lives get better, it seemed like just not sustainable. One kid would leave and another kid would come in. And what that made me think about was, well, why aren't we doing something at a higher level to try to keep these problems from happening in the first place? If these families had had a little more support from the state, a little more money, a little more access to substance abuse or mental health treatment, maybe better jobs, stronger communities, I don't think those kids would have been in that situation in the first place. We would have avoided a lot of pain, a lot of money, and so I really wanted to do something that I felt like was going to change the larger environment, and that didn't seem possible to do doing that kind of frontline practice work. And so that was largely why I decided to go ahead and go back to grad school. But that job was also where I discovered social work. So as I said, I'd studied sociology and psychology as an undergrad. But I think before I had that job, I think I didn't really know what social work was. And I guess that says something about how lucky and privileged I was in my life. But I didn't really know what social workers did or were really, it was kind of something on TV, maybe people that take your kids away. I hadn't really given a lot of thought to what that was. But I worked with a lot of social workers at that facility. The clinical treatment staff were mostly people with masters in social work. And I realized that the way that they approached their work and the way that they thought about larger systems, that was really much closer to kind of what I wanted to do. Social work really takes sort of looks across scale from macro to meso to micro level interactions and thinks about how they're all connected, how the experiences of an individual, right, are really informed by family processes, which are informed by community processes, which are informed by larger public policy. And so there's these larger sort of nested systems that people are embedded in, and we have to think about everything together to really think about how to really improve sort of well-being at different levels. And so that seemed really kind of what I was wanting. It had the sort of practicality that I saw in some psychology work and a kind of that normative bent around what should we be doing, but also that focus on the social structure and on the larger sort of policy sphere that I enjoyed and like to think about for my work in psychology. So that was really lucky. So I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to go and get a PhD in social work. I want to help train social workers. I want to think about solving social problems in a way that is attentive to all of these different contextual issues. And really thinking about how we can develop better policies, develop better community infrastructure to improve the lives of children and families. So that's what I did. I worked actually quite closely with Professor Pock, thinking about what the right setting for me might be. He was able to share with me the scholarship of some sort of preeminent social work scholars. And really solidified for me that was the path that I wanted to take. And so I ended up in a PhD program that allowed me to get both a master's in social work and a PhD in social work at the same time at UCLA.
Amazing. I love to hear like the trajectory of people's careers and how, when you open yourself up to following paths as they unfold before you and as sort of like revelations come to you about what the knowledge and goals, how they can come together to lead you down new paths is really fascinating. So tell me briefly about like what was a highlight of your doctoral work? Can you tell me about your dissertation or experience in your doctoral program that really set you on the path that you're following now at the University of Chicago?
Yeah, absolutely. So my doctoral program at UCLA was really transformative for me in terms of setting me on the research path that I'm on now. I was very lucky to be connected early in my doctoral program with Professor Zeke Hasenfeld, who really was a legend in social work research around both the study of human service organizations as well as the study of poverty and inequality. And it's really the intersection of those things is really where I ended up. His research trajectory and interests really informed mine a lot. I think taking some seeds that I already had and really showing me sort of where I might be able to go with those things. So I worked with Professor Hasenfeld, and he, not too long after I came to UCLA, he got a large grant to do a survey of the nonprofit sector in Los Angeles. And I was hired on to be the lead research assistant on that project. And I never really had thought that much about nonprofits before. They were an important part of the ecosystem that I was thinking about in terms of how policy and community and families sort of all come together. But I hadn't really conceptualized the degree to which human service organizations really serve as the middleman in a lot of ways between individuals and families and public policy. And that idea that it's these organizations that are on the ground, embedded in communities all around us, that sort of really serve this translational purpose between thinking about what public policy's goals are and what policy actually looks like on the ground and how people experience it. And that just was, I was like, oh, this is it for me. There was so much to think about there in terms of, we create these best laid plans, right, at the policy level, but it doesn't always work out on the ground in the same way, right? And a lot of that is because we have a very complex structure where the government pays for a lot of social services that are then implemented by nonprofit organizations. And so policy is sometimes made in ways that are not very reflective of what actual on the ground conditions are. And also sometimes on the ground conditions are incompatible with the policies that are made. So what I got really interested in and what sort of became my particular niche was studying how nonprofits, human service organizations operate as advocates for the communities that they serve. So that was my dissertation, was looking at the advocacy roles and involvement of human service organizations. And I've continued in that work as well as expanding from that to look at, thinking about advocacy as just one part of the policy formulation process. One of the things that I found in particular in my dissertation, and then also other projects that I've done since then, is that a lot of times when people think about nonprofit advocates, they think about organizations that are, really like, oh, we should do this. And they're being, maybe kind of conflictual or in a kind of oppositional role to policy, trying to agitate, for policy changes. And what I found actually is that because of this longstanding relationship where nonprofit providers are providing the services that the government is paying for, these are longstanding relationships between professionals where there is a lot of back and forth conversation. And so what I realized is that this is really, advocacy looks a lot more like getting together for lunch or going to a meeting where you're sort of sharing your impression on something. It's really a series of professional conversations and established trust between people who have different kinds of knowledge bases. And so a lot of my work since then has gone into trying to think about how do we do a better job in sharing knowledge, doing mutual learning across sectors, sort of from residents and community members to nonprofit organizations, between organizations and public policy makers. So really my work, I think I would say now really, can be summed up with trying to think about the ways in which nonprofit human service organizations, governments, and philanthropic foundations can work together in ways that are more effective and equitable. So really trying to think about how do we better communicate to policymakers what the real needs and constraints are on the ground, right? And how do we and how might that help improve policy to make it more responsive, more equitable across multiple domains?
It sounds like such important work. I mean, it seems like the landscape for everything just keeps getting more and more complicated. And every day there's a new organization working toward this or that or the other thing. So it seems like coordinating those things is really important. There's so many more things I want to talk to you about. I wonder maybe we should try a kind of lightning round situation
Sure.
to try to get through a couple more because my list goes on and on and on, and the people will only listen for so long. So, so can you tell me briefly about any big challenge that you've faced in getting to where you are now in your work?
I think every researcher has challenges in terms of thinking about, getting access to new research sites, getting access to funding, finishing things up on time, and the ways that you had it. I've been pretty lucky in that I haven't had sort of major challenges that some people have in terms of I've been pretty healthy. I've stayed at the same institution. I've been able to sort of, I think, I guess, capture a niche for this kind of work and also work to translate that across disciplines. One challenge that I faced a little bit, I would say, though, is that I think social work is becoming more focused on interventions that are focused on interventions for individuals and families, and moving away a little bit from people that are doing work in organizations and administration. In particular, there's still, as I think, a more robust sort of policy segment of social work. And that's how we kind of thought about things. There's sort of people who do organizations, people that do communities, people that do policy, and people that do individuals and families. And as I felt social work moving away from organizations, that's been it's been a little bit of a challenge to find support within social work for my work. And so I've been incredibly lucky to be at the Crown Family School, where I feel like that kind of work has been really valued, where they see the importance of trying to maintain that in social work. It is a historic part of the profession, but it is, in the pursuit of, larger federal grants for research projects and things like that, I think it has been slowly sliding away. And a lot of students who might have been interested in that kind of work have gone on to kind of nonprofit management and public administration and maybe public policy schools. And I think I want to see social work sort of capture that ground. I think we have a lot to offer those students in terms of thinking about things more holistically and across scale. I'd like to see social work really take up that mantle again. And so it's been a little bit of a challenge for me in my career, but it's also been, I think, something that's been important to me in terms of trying to build the field in that way. So it's been a generative challenge, I guess I would say, in terms of trying to work with other scholars that are in this area to build interest in community. And it's been a huge mission of mine in terms of working with my own doctoral students to help them figure out how to see themselves in the profession, and watching them go on and succeed and build sort of robust programs of research on organizations and policy in other universities has been really gratifying.
That's great. And a good lead into what my next question was going to be. Obviously, advising doctoral students is like a huge point of pride, I think, for any professor. What's something else that you're really proud of that you've accomplished in your work?
I think, beyond mentoring doctoral students and seeing them succeed, which I think nothing really beats that feeling. I think the other thing that I've been proud of is the ability to have my work speak across multiple disciplines. So I've been lucky enough to make good connections in multiple fields and people who are in nonprofit studies programs, public policy programs, public administration programs, urban studies, sociology. And so I've published in all of those different kinds of journals, and made really good research connections and collaborations across those different fields. And that's just been a really gratifying process of seeing how I can take the knowledge base that I have from my training in social work and combine it with a knowledge base in another area, and come up with something new and creative, something that maybe either discipline wouldn't have come up with on their own. And so that's been a really fun thing. And the degree to which I've been able to be successful in different interdisciplinary environments has been, that's a real point of pride for me.
And I guess a final question, what's some advice you have for young scholars who are thinking about a career in sociology, and what advice would you have?
So I think, a few things. I think it's important to keep things in perspective, right? I think that academia can be a long road. So I think you really need to think about, sometimes people talk about like setting out the way you want to end, right? So getting good habits in place. I think there's some misconceptions about what's needed in terms of giving up your life to be successful in academia. And I never felt like that was something that I was willing to do. So, I don't work on the weekends. I, log out of work in the evenings. I feel like I work hard when I'm working, but I have other interests and care about spend time with my family and like to do things outdoors. And that I think that's really important for keeping things in perspective and also keeping your mind sort of fresh. I would also say to, not take yourself too seriously. I think for me, that's
Yeah.
been an important, I guess, piece of this is to remember that, this is a job like other jobs.
Mhm.
We do our best. We can have fun with this, right? It seems very serious sometimes. I think, especially in fields like social work, where we're working and with very serious, about, serious issues, life or death issues that affect people, right? And it can be hard sometimes to think about the kinds of pain that people experience in their lives, and a lot of what we're studying is around that, right? And how to reduce that, but also what it looks like for people who are suffering. And so I think being able to also make sure that you can enjoy your work, have fun with your colleagues, I think that's an important thing to, I guess, manage your own mental health for the long run, right?
Great advice for sociologists, academics, humans living in this current times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Well, I do have one. I guess I have one more question. So you mentioned at the top of the conversation the Obama Foundation Scholars Program, and I wondered if you just wanted to say anything else about that. It sounds like a really exciting
Yeah, it's a
opportunity.
great program, the Obama Foundation Scholars Program. This is my first year operating as a faculty director for that program. And it's been an incredibly validating and just fun experience. It is what the program is it is students who are in their last year of their master's program in either the Booth School of Business, the Harris School of Public Policy, or the Crown Family School of Social Work Policy and Practice can apply to be a part of this cohort of students. I believe it's 18 students total, and 6 from each school. And they get a lot of sort of leadership training from the foundation, but we also facilitate here on campus a seminar series with faculty on campus who are doing work on issues of social change, or whose work sort of speaks to that. And do other kinds of work with them to kind of help them develop their own action plans around how they intend to work to create social change in the communities that they are a part of. And so they're students who are engaged and smart and want to make a difference, and they are supportive of each other, and they're curious. And that is one of the best sort of places to be. It's one of the reasons why I love to be on a college campus is to be in rooms where curious people are thinking hard about the world and how to make it better, and that's really what that program is all about.
Thank you for your time today, Professor Mosley. Course takers, if you're enjoying listening to today's interview, please check out the other ones. Leave us a comment, subscribe, follow, and share this episode with your friends and family. You can find out more about the University of Chicago through uchicago.edu or the university's campus in Hong Kong through uchicago.hk. Stay tuned for more.